This is WeatherBrains episode 614, the pre-show for Monday, October 23rd, 2017. Longtime viewers know this is the time of the show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and say outrageous things. We are 10 minutes away from showtime. And Bill Murray is the only guest here, the only regular here. You're not a guest.
We don't have to invite anybody tonight because Rick Smith is going to be in the WeatherBrains hot seat. So,
ooh, well, I like that. I like the home shows.
Saturday night, and he had some great talks at NWA. And one of them relates to phobias, so that'll be really interesting.
We had a tornado in Alabama this morning.
I know, that's crazy.
Was
it actually in Alabama, or was it in Franklin County, Tennessee?
It was in Morgan County, Alabama, Trinity, and EF1.
I guess that's where the helicity was maximized overnight, huh?
2:30 a.m. I was down for 2.4 miles, winds 105 miles an hour, no warning, probably no lightning, maybe a little bit. But when it comes to thunderstorms, what do you always do?
You expect the unexpected.
The unexpected. You got that right. And I'm still looking at waterspout and tornado video from Baldwin County on.
Yeah, that was pretty impressive, wasn't it?
Or yesterday, yeah, that was. That deal hit that Chevron plant. Wow, that was crazy.
I haven't seen that.
Hit a refinery in Pascagoula.
Yeah, that's pretty good size. Pretty good size tornado, wasn't it?
In fact, with the magic of
screen sharing,
the Google, I got so many MP4s I have ripped. Mark Bingley sent me an MP4. That was awesome. He ran the Mississippi State meteorology program back when I was looping through. But let's do a screen share since we're just on video only, since we can watch it now. And let's roll that video. Watch the debris hit this thing.
Wow.
Woo.
There's the roof.
Goodness gracious.
It just explodes. That's crazy.
And this is a small one, that's another reminder. There's no such thing as a weak tornado.
Look at all the debris, all those beams,
but this was taken at a Chevron refining facility at Pascagoula, Mississippi, by an employee.
Oh wow! Well, that like
yeah, it's for some reason the Google's dropping the frame rate. It looks fine. Look at this.
Wow. I bet the language is choice right there.
Yeah, it gets a little salty in here in a minute. But what's really weird?
I had a real video camera, didn't he?
I think it was just a cell phone.
Oh, was it?
But the deal is now, every time somebody sends me a video of a tornado or a waterspout, all these people, hey, could you send me a DM? I have some questions about your video. Could you send me a direct message? And it's all these storm chaser services. And what they do, they get these people to sign up with them so they can sell it. And it's like, come on, man. I got no problem with selling video. That's great. But they gave it to us. And here you are pressuring them to sell it. It's a very awkward situation. And they're inundated, of course, with all the media people. Hey, this is NBC News. Do we have permission? Please fill out this form. And it's like, I'm afraid people are going to they're just going to stop sending us this stuff because of the rigmarole that comes with it.
Yeah, exactly.
But in some of these, video networks, you got to go fill out this form and all this malarkey. I mean, come on, man.
Insane. Yeah, that's insane.
And then there's some lawyer that told them to do that. I understand that. But, that they come up with this language. Do we have the permission to use this on all of our platforms, broadcast and digital? If so, please do this and this and this and this. And I'm thinking, oh, goodness.
Send me some cash and we'll talk.
Yeah. And then you got the ones pressuring them to list it with our service, our storm chasing service, and we'll make you some big money.
Here's a
and
check
it's
for
like,
$3.90. Thank you very much.
oh man! And again, I have no problem.
Speaking of lawyer, James, I got
selling videos.
Don't forget.
Yes.
Don't forget. We do have a case apparently.
Oh, all right. If we get a verdict of $5 million, what are we going to do with that money?
We'll just split it pro rata by how many shows people showed up for. but a nice cease and desist letter is being written, and
wow.
a trademark is being filed, and we basically have that trademark, so we're protesting.
Wow, this is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So where are these jabronis located?
North of the border, eh?
Oh, okay. All right, we'll see. How about that Met Loop crash? Wow, that was an interesting.
That was funny.
The Met Loop has crashed.
That was about as spectacular as that tornado hitting that refinery there.
I've never heard of that website. Apparently, you go in there and you can judge corporations and business entities, and that was really interesting. We got to make that our pick of the week. For those that don't know, there's this company called MetLoop, and they're issuing their own warnings, and they claim a POD of 95,
right?
False alarm ratio of like 5, which we all know
they add up to 100. I mean, whatever.
I mean, it's like they're just making this stuff up. And a big broadcaster in Dallas, Texas, Channel 8 WFAA was using their warnings.
Which makes no sense.
So we had this guy on here, and I mean, he was just, you talk about being in the hot seat. I mean, it was brutal, but hey. So they apparently are.
I like Kevin's quote. It'll still be my favorite quote of all. A roofing company doing weather forecasting on Facebook. What can go wrong?
Oh,
I bought the service for a while, and it was like this, these gigantic polygons would come, that would cover like a quarter of the state. And I'm like, hello. That's not how it works.
No. So where's Brian? Usually he's on here by now.
There must be an election. Is there an election we didn't know about, James?
For those who don't know, Brian volunteers as a poll worker. And if there's ever a time where he has to get up like before 9 o'clock, he always says he has to get some sleep and he can't be on the show. So I don't think there's one.
Is he protecting all the machines from the people that can eavesdrop on them with them, like RFID readers or something now? Is that he's maybe over there gearing up for the next 2018 elections or something? We got a big election here in December. Going to be a lot of the country looking at.
Yeah, I don't do politics. I'm not interested.
Yeah, politics.
Or bad. No politics here.
There's our guest. There's our guest weather brain right there.
I can't wait. I can't wait to talk with Rick Smith.
Honor to be invited. Thank you.
So how did you get interested?
How about the Nate Johnson job going to NBC?
Huge. That is huge.
Wow.
He'll never talk to us again.
No, see, he hadn't been on the show in like months, and that's
he's probably negotiating that contract the whole time.
Yeah, negotiating a contract with NBC. I mean, he's like running the weather operation of all the NBC O&Os. So
he's been flying back and forth to 30 Rock, doing all these negotiations. Probably.
Yeah,
he's kind of a big deal now.
Yes.
Probably never hear from him again. So Aubrey is out. I invited Kim.
Yeah, she said she's coming, but I haven't seen her yet.
She should be on the show since she was kind of in ground zero out there this weekend. And Kevin, I think he said he's out for 2 weeks or something. Some vague excuse. I can't wait to hear Kevin's thoughts on Barry Myers as the head of NOAA. And boy, those guys in South Alabama, they had to do tornado warnings during NFL football games yesterday. Oh, I mean, it was, I feel their pain. It was brutal. What you do, you go to the TV station's Facebook page, and then click on post and then visitor posts. And that's where most of the hate is located there. And sometimes it'll have comments under post the station makes, but I think they had a Saints game going on and something else. Anyway, it's one of those things where you can't win. I mean, complaining that you're not on doing tornado coverage. The next guy's griping, hey, you're doing tornado coverage. I can't watch the football game. And if somebody's griping the double box, I can't see anything. It's just bad. It is just bad. Kim, welcome.
Bad, Kim Cloco. It's bad.
Kim's not bad.
Kim can't hear a word we're saying. Can you?
I can now.
Okay.
Show us your fancy new microphone.
Oh, my little snowflake. It's pretty great. I like him.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Have you named your microphone yet?
Besides just calling him Snowflake? And I think Snowflake's pretty cute. I might just keep calling him that. He also has the blue logo, so I might just call him my boy Blue. We'll see what sticks.
So what do you call your microphone, James?
Heil PR40.
What do I have, James? I have a PR20.
You have a Heil PR20.
I have a blue, but it's a bigger version than Kim's little snowball.
That's the 1932 version of the microphone Kim has.
Mine
That's
is
the one
the
that FDR used on his fireside chats right there.
It's a Death Star, I call it.
Oh, here we go. Brian Peters. He must have gotten
Brian sent a note. Brian sent a note. He said he couldn't get in.
Yeah, Kim couldn't get in either, she said. I sent her the direct URL.
It just keeps saying, please wait. How'd you get in, Brian?
I clicked on your name.
I think the Russians have hacked your computers, Brian.
Moose and Squirrel and Brian Peters.
I have one that's still
I'm the only guy in here old enough to know who Moose and Squirrel is. Except maybe Brian.
Yeah.
From
Moose
Bullwinkle?
and Squirrel. Brian, who is Moose and Squirrel?
Well, of course, it's cartoons.
Well, no, what are their names? Do you remember?
Moose and Squirrel. Okay. Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yes, Rocky and Bull. That show is funny. I mean, that show is just funny. I didn't get half those jokes until I was like 25 years old. And I mean, now it's funny. And Kevin is here.
Hey.
Hey. Hey.
Long time no see.
I was quoting you from the Metloop people there, Kevin.
Quoting me?
Yeah. You said a roofing company doing weather forecasts on Facebook. What could go wrong?
I said that.
Let's get started. We're on TV. Welcome to our television viewers. Let's get the thing recording here so we can talk about all this stuff and get it in the real show. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains is the weekly show that's all about weather. This is episode number 614 for the 23rd of October, 2017. Thanks a lot for joining us. And it feels like fall where we are down here in the Deep South. Brian Peters, do you feel a touch of fall in the air?
I feel a touch of fall, except I don't see much color yet.
Yeah, we'll see our colors peak around Christmas time down here.
It looks that way, yes.
Yeah, no, it'll come on quick after some rain and this cool. I guarantee it's going to come on quick. But no, it is a time where much of the country, except for Los Angeles, where they're playing the World Series, it's going to be nice and cool. They're going to do like triple digits out here. This might be the hottest World Series kickoff ever.
Yeah, but the nation's national high is today was 107. That's obscene for October.
Where was that? In Palm Springs?
Fullerton, California.
Wow, goodness. All right, well, we got a home show tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun. We love the home shows because we I don't know, I just feel loose. I don't feel like I have to be constrained here. I can just be me. Kevin, do you feel constrained when we have guests on the show, or are you?
I'll tell you what I'm feeling is I realize I have a new machine here, and they have quite a bit updated the camera on the latest version of the MacBook Air, and I'm a little concerned because I am a lot uglier than I thought I was.
You
This is
clearly have a
it's a much better looking picture, except for me. So I maybe need to go back to the old machine here for this program.
It's the tie that's undone. That's what's.
I'm about to say you're not gonna wear that tie on the air, are you?
Yeah, well, tie or not, I don't think it's gonna help.
So what brought on this new computer? You just feel the need to go get one. 7 years old and it's still working good.
You know what happened? The other one was quite a workhorse. I've had it for years. The screen started to act up a little bit, and there's no Apple store in Wichita Falls, so I suffered with it for a couple of days, and then I was able to go down to Fort Worth and get an appointment, and I got in there, and he took the Apple ID, and he went, oh, and I went, oh, that's not good, and apparently mine is it was a 2011. And it's what they call vintage now. And
vintage, yes.
They're not allowed to work on it anymore.
Right. I have one of those too.
It was pretty disappointing, yeah. Because and I talked. The guy was real cool about it. He says, "I just can't." And I said, "Well, there's a store up here. There's a authorized dealer or licensor or repair shop or whatever." And he said, "Well, let me tell you the way that's going to go. Probably is it's going to be X number of hundreds of dollars, and then those guys have rates of hourly rate and blah 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 blah, and so." You're probably getting on between $500 and $600 to replace a screen in a machine that I could, that is 6 years old, that I could get for $900. So I opted for the new one. None of that has to do with weather.
No, but the camera looks good. It really does look good.
Yeah, it's a lot different camera. Yeah, I'm gonna have to turn it off, I think.
No, man.
You know what? I'll just punch up Kim. She's better looking. I'll just look at her.
Oh, Lord.
So, Kim, how do you respond to that?
I do not know, except to say you're looking pretty good, Kevin. I think you've got nothing to worry about. You look really nice, and so do the wires behind you. They're looking really good.
That's our ceiling of our studio. It's a very old building, and I'm not going to go into what's probably not holding those wires up. Right? Scare me.
I bet you never feel terrified in there ever.
Yeah, well, you should. They're at the. It's actually this is for those who are watching. It's kind of what they call a Quonset hut. It's got the kind of the domed roof to it, and it's metal to some degree, but we have had hailstorms in here, and the wall is probably, I don't know, not 20, 25 feet away from all the computers in here. But there have been days during hailstorms where I'm up on the wall and I literally can't hear the number 2 guy here running the computers and doing the things just 20 feet away from me. It's so loud in here.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the studios I've been in are kind of like that. And, James, I feel like yours had places that were sort of similar. Is that by design? Is that better for acoustics or?
No, it's just old and cheap.
Yeah, cheap. Cheap's the operative word.
Yeah, that's right. That's the key right there. So Kim and Rick had a little weather event. Bill Murray, I'll kind of let you set this thing up. We got a home show. I like home shows.
Yeah, it's really more than just a home show because Rick is kind of he's a really big deal in the weather enterprise, and we don't just get to put him in the hot seat anymore.
Just stop.
After he had like 11 presentations at NWA in California, I thought he deserved a show. So
he is a big deal. I got to thank him because he put on a real nice media workshop. What was that, last week, I guess, Rick?
Yeah, last Wednesday.
Yeah, that was good. Had some people from Oak City and some of the Wichita Falls market people, and Tom Hale from Sherman Denison market came as well, and that was a real good event. So we appreciate that. There was a lot of good information on that.
And oddly enough, we talked a lot about QLCS tornadoes and radar data artifacts, and we got to try out both of those on Saturday.
Yeah, so talk about this Saturday event. It was also a pretty big deal for y'all, wasn't it, Rick?
It was a big deal. Saturday was a long day. Now I'll admit right up front, I did not stay and work in the office. I was home for most of that, but I know Kim and I saw Kim multiple times. I never got a chance to talk to her. We had the National Weather Festival Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Wow. And we had, I don't know, I'm hearing different numbers, but we had thousands of people there. I mean, if you've ever been in the National Weather Center building, it was so crowded you couldn't walk at some points downstairs because the people that are really big deals are all the TV meteorologists and signing the headshots and getting pictures. So But there was a lot of cool stuff going on, so we worked that, and then it was we had severe weather as expected. We had a cold front coming down. We had a dry line out west, and we had storms kind of developing in two areas. And anytime we see storms developing down toward Lawton, and then you start hearing the word Chickasha, and you start hearing the word Blanchard, and then you're like, if they had never built that stupid Interstate 44 there, I think we'd all be much safer. Because that's the only way the storms.
You know this. There are people who believe that.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. We talked to
freeway for tornadoes.
We talked to people who truly believe that, but that's how they find their way here, evidently. But
I say the mistake was not building it; was making it a toll road. That's what's made weather god angry.
Well, I thought that would reduce the number of storms that would want to pay the toll to get up here. I think
have toll
in the booth or something. So
yeah, and I have to say, Rick, I was kind of upset with the tornado that did happen in Norman. It ended at the stupid river again.
No, hold on. I'm going to show something here.
Keep those myths going.
I messaged Randy and I was just like, you have to be kidding me. We are going to.
Hold on. I'm trying to find the screen share thing because, let's see. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, let me zoom out. Doug Spieger went out to do the damage survey. And I said, I don't care what you do, Doug, but that tornado must cross the river. So this is the Canadian River, the almighty, impenetrable Canadian River that blocks Norman from the tornadoes. It did, in fact, cross that river. And
I don't know. It looks like it weakened right after it went over to me.
And then here's the weather center right here.
Oh,
somebody told me on Twitter today that it crossed the river, but the weather center caused it to dissipate. So
that's what it is.
Oh
it's that giant antenna
that
on
was
top
a
of
joke,
the weather
though.
center.
Oh, brother.
Somebody from the building that told me that. But anyway, so yeah. So Kim, it did in fact cross the river. So cross,
Very good. Very excellent.
Was there ground evidence of that, or was it just because there was debris thrown across the river?
There you go.
No, there was damage. Although a lot of this area east of the river was hard to access. I mean, there was definitely physical damage, and plus we had some video or some pictures, I guess, of a funnel and possible tornado that were further east of that. It could have gone even further east than this, but and you know. Doug didn't just draw this line because I asked him to. This is legit damage survey. So before anybody starts getting a conspiracy theory going,
I think conspiracy theories already started.
The worst part is it's 2 blocks away from Rudy's barbecue.
Yeah, there you go.
Rudy's is like right.
It was even right for the sewage treatment plant. That would have been one crappy end.
There's the show title.
It smells bad enough in our building as it is. So can you imagine?
Yeah. Now leave Rudy's at it. It's not good.
Yeah, Rudy's was right there. I mean, so anyway, it was by tornado standards, it was relatively weak. But what got all the attention was this hit it hit very close to the Riverwind Casino, which is right here, where the Oklahoma governor was attending the Beach Boys concert. And I don't think people in the casino even knew a tornado happened. Minimal damage to the building, really. But still a big deal. And then we had other tornadoes too. We had a legit, more of a supercell tornado out in southwest Oklahoma. And so, yeah, it was a busy day. Lots of warnings. And Doug from our office spent yesterday doing damage surveys. So, and then we still had people going, wow, isn't this unusual for October? No, not really. We have tornadoes in October and in January, and tornado season is January 1st through December 31st, as we always say.
So any recriminations from the casino at all, Rick? Or?
No, I mean, we've talked to them. I talked to the Chickasaw Nation Emergent today. It's their casino. So we're going to have some meetings pretty soon to talk about how things went, kind of an after action review. We did our own little after action review in the office today. And so no, I think things went well. One thing that really the timing, I mean, we don't want tornadoes to happen, but we did have that media workshop on Wednesday and talked about how we wanted to use NWS chat more to put information about radar issues that we were identifying. And Vivek Mahali, who did the radar presentation, one of the radar presentations at the workshop, was working, and he was just, I don't know how he typed so fast, but he was, you know, trying to identify these side lobe contamination issues that looked like really bad velocity or really strong velocity couplets, but in fact were not. So there were some real velocity couplets, but so we got a lot of good feedback from the TV stations and some good reports. And so it, you know, we would like to have had more warning on it, but that's what happens with these things.
So explain those side lobe issues as best you can, Rick.
As soon as I said the word side lobe contamination, I said
that was a serious mistake.
Dang it, he's going to ask me to explain it.
Well, back on.
You can't escape the hot seat tonight, Rick. You're in it.
Well, it's getting hot early already. Really, basically, the radar beam goes out, the beam of energy goes out from the radar, and there are, you can think of it as kind of donuts around that beam of energy. So it's not just one lobe of energy. There are lobes on the side of it, and because of the way the signal reflects back, it creates these false velocity signatures, and there's other artifacts that happen to the three-body scattered light and things like that. But it's related to the way the energy of the radar comes back to the radar in those side lobes. And we're going to have Vivek on here to correct everything I just said. We need to have
No, that was
that
was a good presentation he did, and you handled it well just then.
Yeah. So, but that it's something very common, and we see it all the time in monitoring TV stations. We've seen other weather service offices. We've fallen for it in the past too. I mean, it's nearby where you may have a supercell, where you may have a legitimate circulation, but usually one of the telltale signs is, like on some of the storms, even from Saturday, there was a hook echo, a hook in the reflectivity, but the velocity couplet was displaced, and those are usually displaced some distance to the east or northeast. So if you kind of match up your cursors and you put the cursor on the hook where you think the circulation should be, the side lobe contaminated circulation on radar would appear to be several miles to the east of that, so they don't match up. But if you're only looking at velocity, like a lot of people do during severe weather, then you may not pick up on that.
Well, and one of the things
we're trying to be much more aggressive in putting things in chat about that. We didn't know how much of that to do, but I don't know if it was Kevin or somebody dared us to try to put too much in there. So we took you up on that. Yeah.
But one of the things that I came away from with that was it's almost like ratings, where you look at the trend. It's when something doesn't look right and you're looking at just one velocity scan or one image, you got to look at the trend of the previous ones and see what's happening, as opposed to getting stuck on just that one. And yeah, you're looking at that one, and it's going to be, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes or 6 till the next one comes in, depending upon the radar mode. And so it's a long time to sit there and wait. But if it just doesn't look quite right, again, talking about the velocity product, if you go back and loop that thing, it gives you a better feel, in addition to what Rick said about the displacement with the reflectivity.
Right.
Well, we've certainly gotten our money's worth from our guest WeatherBrain tonight already. I think we all can take that information away and use it in our next severe weather event. So Rick, y'all are right there a mile north or so of the actual tornado. Is there any consideration, or is there a point where you have to evacuate the National Weather Service Norman when there's a tornado threatening you, or are you hardened enough to withstand tornado?
I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but contrary to popular belief, there is nothing hardened really about the Weather Center building. And in fact, depending on where you are in the building and how hard it's raining, it's quite the opposite. But I don't know. Wow. She's on a higher floor than I am. She can maybe.
Well, one of our colleagues, Randy Pepler, always has a waterfall that comes into his office. And in over 10 years of the building being open, they've never been able to fix it. And they try every single year, and it just never gets fixed.
Kepler Falls, it's always there. but no, there's nothing really hardened about the building itself. I mean, you've been there. It's a lot of glass. Kind of the federal side of it's a little bit more hardened, not from tornadoes, but for, bad people trying to do bad things to the building. But if we needed to take shelter from a tornado, we have a backup office. Actually, we have 3 different backup offices. And actually on Saturday, we were in contact with the Tulsa office as this tornado was developing. It was moving, kind of straight for the building there for a time. So we were in contact with them and let them know to be ready. Not so much that the building would be incapacitated, but if we took a big power hit or lost comms or something like that, that's the most usual suspect. We've never taken shelter. We've never left the office. We've had very close calls. Kim, I think you were around there on May 24, 2011.
Mhm.
That was probably one of the scariest days.
I was kissing my apartment goodbye on that one.
That was a bad day. And we were looking out our window at the weather center and seeing debris falling outside the window. And my wife's texting me pictures of pieces of Blanchard or, these little towns to our southwest in our backyard. And it was kind of creepy. But I think the Storm Prediction Center actually did shut down that day. But we stand at the window and dare the tornado to come near us. But no, I'm just kidding. We're going to be very smart. We're going to practice what we preach. If we need to take shelter, we'll do it, but we haven't had to yet. We're always ready to, though. And on a day like May 24, 2011, where it's coming right at us and we know it, we've already been in touch with Tulsa, and sometimes we just have them on the phone and we say, okay, please understand that we have 3 people issuing tornado warnings right now. You have to be ready to take this over. And so we practice all the time. We talked about service backup when we talked about hurricanes. And so it's something we think about.
So how hard is it to flip that switch, Rick, for them to take over?
It's not that hard. I mean, their workstations are configured to be able to, they can log into a workstation and it can be a Norman workstation where they have access to our WarnGen, our warning generation software, our graphical forecast editor. They have passwords to our social media. They can get into our chat and chat as us. So it's pretty when everything's working correctly, it's pretty, we can just say, hey, you're Norman now, and they're Norman. They just have to log in to the workstation as us and then go from there.
I was a little confused about who the backup is for SPC now. So who is that at this point in time?
Yeah, SPC's backup is now Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, I think that's right. They just did a test. They actually issued a practice watch for us, I think last week. I think it was last week. They did it. It was kind of an internal test, but they actually went through the process and issued the watch for Oklahoma. And so yeah, they used to be Offutt Air Force Base, but it's Scott now.
Outstanding. Kim, you got a story.
Yeah. So when the tornado, so Rick, assuage my fears here. When the storm was back by Chickasha, was that a side lobing issue when that looked like a pretty decent couplet, or was that actually worrisome?
No, that was legit. Yeah, that was legit.
Okay. So at that point, when it was hitting there, I turned to Patrick and I said, we should probably start preparing for this. Actually, because we hadn't, done the safe place selfie earlier in the day, and we knew that we had about 45 minutes or so, and so we got the storm shelter ready, and we got our cats corralled into their little carriers, and they were like, "Why?" And we were just like, "Trust us, trust us." So we sat and watched it, and then the cold front actually caught up with the line, and it looked like it was undercutting the storms.
It was.
So. At that point, I mean, we were watching Channel 5, and they flipped back to the football games. And I just sort of said, all right, well, this is kind of, the cold fronts killed it. The whole line was dying. And I said, expert me, I think we're good. I think we're good. And then the sirens started going off. And Patrick looks at me, and he was like, you're a meteorologist, right? You're like 2 degrees in that. And I was just like, yep. So and I pulled up the phone and saw that it was hitting Riverwind or nearby at that point. It was south. And he was just like, so what do we do now? And we live sort of on the north side of town. And I thought, we do have a storm shelter, but it's in this stupid garage. And where do I not want to be if a tornado is hitting? and trying to get downstairs the garage. So I had us duck, even when we prepared everything, because I'd stopped watching, we just kind of ducked into our bathroom with the cats, the most interior room, and waited it out. And I felt really silly, like, why did this take me so much by surprise? But it's just one of those darn things. And sometimes those things happen. And I know a lot of our friends and colleagues in town were similarly caught a little bit unaware. I had actually posted on Facebook when we were starting to prepare. I posted on Facebook like, "Hey, friends, just so you know, we're getting our storm shelter ready." Yeah. And I had colleagues, other places around the country who were watching, who told me, "Oh, the cold front's going to catch it. It'll be fine." This is what you should never underestimate the atmosphere.
No, and we never underestimate these boundaries either, because if you need to log in NWS chat, that's because we were the message in chat was, okay, the threat is diminished, the storm is undercut now, but we're watching closely because we have seen, and it was kind of playing cat and mouse with the cold front the whole way, and it caught up to the boundary again there just west of Riverwind, just near Newcastle, and spun up. So we've been burned on that more times than I care to admit, but I can certainly see it. And it was a rare instance where I was actually at home, and 3 of my kids were here, so they were getting to see me in meteorologist mode, sitting at home, flipping through the channels, and commenting occasionally on the weather occurrences, and so it was really weird being home and the sirens going off. I don't think I've ever been home with the tornado siren sounding, so it felt really wrong. It felt really weird.
Kim, in the wake of that story, now that you've had personal hands-on, for lack of a better term, experience, how does that, if it does, change the perspective on the work that you're doing?
Yeah, it's so interesting because usually I'm usually sheltering in the weather center, and I've been there for a long time. If it's a big outbreak, I'm either chasing or I'm just sheltering there. So I think this gives me a little piece of humble pie. I felt a little bit of that confusion that people probably face when they're just getting a sort of siren out of the blue. We knew storms were coming, and we'd done a little bit of preparation, but when you're in that moment, you're like, oh, geez, I really don't have time to do very much. For me in my work, I feel like it's important not just to tell people what the ideal thing is for them to do, but for them to have a couple different options depending on how things unfold. You might not be able to get to the best shelter. And I actually encountered that in the Southeast after April 27th. There was a gentleman that I'd interviewed who he'd planned ahead of time to go to his sort of earthen shelter outside of his home. And by the time the storm was on him, he was sort of in his backyard, and there was debris falling, and he didn't think he had time to get the door open and get everything in there. He just had time to run inside and grab his wife and get in the bathtub. And that was all that was left of his house. And it turned out that if he'd gone into the earthen mound shelter, there was sort of this little concrete slab over the top of it. And that had gotten compressed into the shelter. They would have been in a worse spot. But he didn't have time, and he had to just sort of improvise on the fly without thinking much about it. So sometimes that happens, and it might be worth thinking about.
How is it going to impact the message that you're giving us, who are the people that are giving the end users the message?
That's a great question. I mean, it's hard for you to do everything for everybody. And the best thing you can probably do, I mean, I had thought about the fact that the most interior room of our house was that bathroom before that point. So I knew where to take us. Just encourage people to think about multiple places of safety they can get to really quickly, if anything. And it might be more apropos for events like this where you have QLCS, thunderstorms and tornadoes may not have as much lead time. People might not have as much time to get to more advanced shelters, especially if that shelter puts them in danger, like if they have to go outside to get to it, or if they have to go into a garage. I had never thought about the garage thing until that thing was really, really close. And that would not have been the right place to be.
So why did you say you wouldn't have wanted to go there, Kim? What was the reason?
Why I wouldn't have wanted to go to the garage?
Yeah.
It's the point of failure for most homes.
But that's where your storm shelter is?
Oh yeah, sorry. The storm shelter is below ground in the garage.
But you would have had to gone through a lot of rigmarole to get into it? Okay.
I would have had to have gone all the way up to the shelter itself is right by the garage door. So I would have had to have gone right up to the garage door, opened the thing, and then we would have to have gone down in that and then closed up. And I didn't know if we had that much time before it would hit.
Kim, I'll tell you what we did. I mean, we kind of, and it's hard to give this message to just everybody, but if I'm talking to some people, I do try to encourage them to have kind of 2 levels of planning, because I didn't really, even with me and my family were really keeping up with it. We knew what was going on. Obviously, we saw the tornado on Channel 4, watching that, and the chasers there that were reporting that. And I really wasn't concerned. We have a garage shelter too, that you have to go out and slide the door open. I didn't even go out and unlock it. I was just, given the environment and given the nature of what I expected the storms to be, we could have kind of an alternate shelter, like under the stairway right off our living room, that we could have gotten to in 10 seconds if we needed to. So I didn't even, my daughters are laughing at me. I didn't even get out of the chair to really, to go even get ready for the shelter, because I knew, this is not going to be a big, long track, violent tornado. Probably this is something that you can get, if you could just get to your closer shelter, your shelter maybe that doesn't need, where you don't need to be underground. Giving that message to people, it's hard enough to get people to have one shelter plan or one place to go, but sometimes people don't take shelter, don't take actions at all because they don't think they can do enough. But sometimes I think people don't understand how little they can really do. Just a little bit of action can really, in that tornado, if that tornado had hit a house, just a little bit of action, just getting away from the windows would have been enough.
Yep, absolutely. And that's something that I was thinking too. And that's the good thing about most tornadoes that do spin up that quickly, is they're going to be weak. So if you can just get a little bit better off, then you're probably going to be just fine. I think that's a really important message to send too, on days like yesterday, or days with even more significant, widespread, but QLCS type tornadoes that are possible. It's a really important thought.
So Kim, when you were doing your surveys, and especially in the South, did you ever run into anyone that told you that they didn't take shelter because if it was their time and God meant for them to die, that they would just go and there was nothing you could do about it? Did you run into that sort of a philosophy ever?
I know that that's something that's seen some debate in academic literature, if that's really a quote unquote phenomenon. And I'm not qualified to answer if it's, enormously significant in some places, but I've run across a few folks. There was only one person out of the 72 in-depth interviews I conducted in the Southeast who felt that way. And I would classify him as someone who was very, he lived in a house with a dirt floor. He was sort of not well connected to information nor means of doing much else. So he got, on that day, he got in the middle of his house and prayed. When his town was actually hit twice that day. So I think I've run across one other person in Oklahoma for whom that was their response. So it's the vast minority in my experience. I would say that most people are very motivated to do what it takes to protect their families and protect themselves. And the question for them just really is, what is the best thing for them to do?
I got the opportunity again today to teach 196 graders meteorology in 5 sections at a local middle school. And I asked every one of them, if they were afraid of the weather, expecting that maybe 3, 4, 5 out of every section would raise their hand. They almost unanimously as a group raised their hands together. And I'm beginning to believe 6th grade is sort of that peak fear time for severe weather. I know when I was in the 6th grade, I was petrified of the weather. And so I told them that story about, the April 3rd, 1974 outbreak being the last night that I was ever scared of the weather. But I was really surprised that they all unanimously said they were scared of the weather here in Alabama. And I found that interesting. What would you say to that, Kim?
Well, it's so interesting. I mean, they would have been then 6, 7 years old for the April 27th outbreak. I mean, that's the age I've found that most meteorologists are born. When something happens to you and you're about that age, I was that age when Plainfield happened in the Chicago suburbs, and that's what really got me into meteorology. Fear after that, and seeing what that did to that community, and all those people who perished with very little to no warning. And I wanted to help things be better, and that motivated me to learn. And so I think there really is something about that time in your life where safety, sense of safety. And I'm sure that there are people who study developmental psychology who could speak more eloquently to this point. But I'm pretty sure I've seen that age is very susceptible.
This makes 2,500 kids, I guess, over 3 years. And it is definitely increasing. Now, some of that may be a group dynamic, but I can tell you that 2 years ago, when I first did this and I asked that question, it would only be a couple of kids. And they would have been 8 or 9, I guess, that day. And, and last year there were more, and this year it was almost unanimous. And so I think you're right. I think there's an age thing going on there.
That is so interesting. I wonder if we were to do a study of meteorologists, what age we were when some event occurred that got us into the field, because that is for most the story. I wonder if there would be sort of a peak around that age. I wouldn't be surprised. I hear almost everybody at 6 or 7. That's really interesting. That's been experienced.
Yeah, I guess for me, James, it was the GES tornado in 1968. Do you remember that tornado in western Birmingham?
I do. I remember WVOK stayed on the air past their sign-off time to cover that tornado. The GES was the Walmart of the day back in the mid-'60s. But yeah, that was headed right toward downtown Birmingham.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember my dad and grandfather taking me out to see the damage around West End and Rickwood Field in that area. And I think that had a very frightening effect on me from that age on.
I was never afraid of weather. I'm from rural South Alabama, and back in the summer days, we had no iPhones, iPods, iPads, doodads, Xboxes. We'd just go play in the woods all day. And those afternoon storms, every day, we'd have these air mass storms, and they were just fascinating to me. I was never afraid of them. And then as I got older, I moved to Tuscaloosa in the 1970s, went through a bunch of crazy outbreaks, but there was never fear. It was always fascination with me. So I guess I'm blessed.
Yeah, I went to bed on the night of April 3rd, 1974, when forced to do so by my parents about 1 a.m., fully expecting never to wake up the next day. I mean, it's all over. It was that scary of a night. When I woke up the next morning, I was never fearful of the weather. Rick, that's a good place to sort of transition. You gave a great talk about weather phobias at the NWA annual meeting out in Anaheim, and I thought that was really good. James and I got introduced to a young man a couple of years ago who lived in Auburn, Alabama, who was so petrified of the weather that he became debilitated, had to be checked out of school. He was 3rd or 4th grade, I guess, maybe a little older than that. He was probably 5th or 6th grade, and he was petrified of the weather. So my suggestion was that he come and meet James, and we, sit around and talk about it. And James, I saw this young man a couple of weeks ago, and he is completely cured of his phobia. So whatever you said to him that night and to my son must have resonated, because they say he is now a little severe weather champion for Auburn, Alabama. All you can do is start a process. And let me just say, that is a very real thing. You never believe that that's something the kids are making up or they're exaggerating, or I say kids, adults as well. But that's good to know. And not everybody is cured, but some can be, and it's a process. You've just got to start a long process of changing your thought pattern when it comes to storms. And so you had some advice about that, Rick, when you were talking about, some advice that we could use as those last mile people talking to the end users.
I was going to go back to Kim's comment real quick. I I was almost that bad. I mean, I wasn't debilitating fear, but it was really bad. And it went back as long as I can remember. And I don't know that there was a pivotal moment that triggered it for me. I just remember always being both fascinated and terrified by storms. I was fascinated during the day and terrified at night. If there were storms at night, and I grew up in the Memphis, Tennessee area, Olive Branch, Mississippi there. And we had, just like you guys have now, storms any time of the day or night, any time of the year, basically, and lots of nighttime storms. So I couldn't put enough pillows over my head to block out the sound. And I was just terrified. And then at some point the switch flipped, and we do talk to people in our office, and weather service offices around the country do, who have that debilitating fear. There was a lady that came to the weather festival on Saturday, and I didn't get to meet her, but my boss did. And she was in a tornado in southern Oklahoma back in 2016, I guess it was, last May. And she now has just a debilitating fear. It's like, almost non-functional sometimes on a severe weather day. So what we found, and there's not been a whole lot of real hardcore research is done on this, but what I've read is about 75 to 80% of people that have this storm anxiety or phobia kind of developed it from some pivotal event that they had, some weather event that they lived through or experienced directly. There's another smaller percentage that experienced something indirectly. Maybe it's just watching television coverage or watching too much Jim Cantori on the Weather Channel or whatever, And then there's about 5% that they don't, like me, that don't know where it came from. So, and we've been working with some mental health professionals, and really what we're trying to do is, it's certainly not a meteorologist's job to try to cure people or diagnose them, but our job, I think what we can do is we can offer the substantial segment of the population that we think has some fear of storms, but it's not that phobia level where they're incapacitated. Give them some practical advice. And Kevin mentioned in the chat a second ago, we need to be doing more information or instructional information about what people can do to get ready or, to deal with a tornado, more details on that. And I've been thinking that for a long time. So what we're trying to do is develop some materials for people. And we did kind of an informal survey and asked people, okay, you're afraid of storms. Specifically, what is it about the storms that you're afraid of? And the answers were fascinating. And we kind of categorized them. So what we're doing is trying to develop some information for them that says, okay, well, if you are afraid, if you're Kim, and you don't have this exactly, but if you have a garage shelter, but you're afraid to go out in it because you're afraid you're not going to get to it in time, or you're afraid that if you get in it, the house is going to collapse on top of you and you're going to be buried in it. So we're trying to give practical advice. Well, most communities in Oklahoma have shelter registration programs, and you can register your shelter. So if, God forbid, you are trapped in your shelter, the fire department will come find you. They'll know you're there, and they'll know to look for you. So that's kind of where we are now. We're not in the mental health diagnosis business. We're just trying to marry the meteorology with kind of those behavioral sciences in some practical way to help people. And I think helping people that have the storm anxiety will help everybody else too.
So what were some of those other fears that maybe we need to be cognizant of, maybe we don't think of on a daily basis because we don't experience them?
Let's see. There were categories regarding shelters. Either I don't have a shelter, my shelter is not going to be good enough for the big tornado, I'm not going to be able to get to it in time. If I have to go to another shelter, I'm worried they're not going to let my pets come in with me. Those types of things. The people are afraid of kind of the informational category. James, you'll love this. Lots of people said, well, the TV people don't talk about storms in my area, so I'm afraid I'm not going to know when something's happening. Or I'm afraid I'm not going to get enough warning. Or James will also like this, I'm afraid the sirens aren't going to wake me up. These are real things. I mean, it's frustrating, but these are real people. Those are some of the big categories. There's other things. There's lots of people that live in apartments or live in mobile homes that just truly don't have anywhere to go, and they don't have any options really that they know of. So it's just it's to give our forecasters a better sense of who we're talking to out there, and that it's not, and they know this, but it's just another reminder that these are not just colored blobs on the radar. And, you know, from a meteorological science perspective, there are people on the other end of that, and the information that we're providing and the way that we're providing it impacts people's lives in a very real way.
So are there some messages, Rick, that you were able to develop that you're especially proud of that help empower people?
Well, not that I can think of specifically, and it's still kind of a work in progress, but that really is the key word. It is empowerment. It is trying to give people, and that was some of the undertones of every comment that we got on our little informal survey were, it feels, I don't like being out of control. I don't like being in a situation I can't control. I don't like the unknown. I don't like the fear of what might happen. So it's all about giving people some power and giving them empowerment. Like, you know, like Kim was getting ready for the tornado Saturday night. Well, she was empowered because she could get the carriers for the cats, and she was doing something. You don't have to be a victim that just sits and on your hands and waiting for this inevitable disaster to hit you. It's only a disaster if you're not ready for it. And so it's about empowerment. That's what it is. It's about giving people, letting people know. And it's really cool when we're able to interact with some of these people, like on Facebook especially. We'll get a lot of people that send us direct messages. And it's amazing how just a little bit of information helps some of them. You know, you explain something about what they didn't understand what a tornado watch meant. And when you explain it, they're like, oh, I thought it meant I was about to die or something. Or you explain how the weather information system works. There's little things we can do to help a lot of people, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So Kim, what would you add to that? Anything?
Oh, I just think that's right on. That's really great. And what you guys are really talking about, the academic literature, the sort of buzz phrases are building response efficacy, which is the belief in trust in different response options for being helpful to them, and self-efficacy, which is their belief that they can do it. And that's what I so don't like about the messaging that goes on sometimes in Oklahoma with big tornado days, that there's this sort of certain death messaging. If you're not below ground, you'll die. And it's not true. It's completely untrue. Almost everyone actually survives those things. But it's also disempowering. It's not something that you can respond to in a rational way. Then your only option is to try to flee like mad when it's almost on top of you. And when you're anywhere with a population over 3, that can be problematic. You know, I think that's something that we need to be really mindful of. Don't just emphasize the danger, but also try to find ways to emphasize the safety and message the safety. And what you're talking about, Rick, is so speaking to that. It's really about trying to find ways to help people do something just a little bit better. You know, get yourself to some place that's a little bit better, or, you know, learn a little bit more, get yourself educated on what options are before you, and put yourself to the task of preparing those little things that are going to make all the difference. And that, I think, can help people to feel a sense of calm. And we really don't have to put people into this position where they are mentally unhealthy because they're so worried when these events take place. They really will affect such a small number of people, even the biggest days. It's just not worth that many people losing their joy, their mental well-being over. And there are those things you can be doing, like you're saying, to really help people a lot.
Now, I've always preached that more information can help you overcome this. But Rick, I thought I heard you say something that day in California that's not really clear. So I'd ask you and then get Kim to follow up on, is more information always good, sometimes good? Well, you know, what's the situation there?
Well, I'll kind of cite the studies that we were able to find on severe weather phobia, and really the 2 main ones that have been done over recent years really have differing views, and really they're looking at small sample sizes, and it's not clear. But there is one study that says that more information helps people, like learning more. They encourage people to go to storm spotter training classes. They encourage people to learn more about the weather. And we've seen some of that anecdotally, just talking to people on Facebook. It's like you give them a little bit of education, something they didn't understand, and then it seems to help them, the best we can tell. But there's another school of thought that's like, well, the more information hurts. And I can really see that both ways. One of the most rewarding things I've ever gotten to do is similar to your experience, Bill, is we've actually had therapists who have suggested that kids come to visit the Weather Center to help them get over their fear. And we've actually had kids that were buried in the rubble of Briarwood Elementary and Plaza Towers Elementary who I've had the chance to come to the building and give them a tour with their parents and talk to them about, look at this whole army of people here that's watching your back, and we're doing everything we can to watch out for you, and every report I get back says it helps. And that's the most, what you just told James. I mean, that's one of the most rewarding things I've ever been able to do. But then I see, like, there was one kid in particular who was in that situation, and I was talking to her mom, and I said, well, what do y'all do during severe weather? And she told me they watch TV, and they just watch it constantly. And I don't know, for them, it helped. It seemed like it helps her, but I just wondered, does it help your daughter? Or, because I'll be completely honest, it stresses me out. I was at home watching TV Saturday night, and I'm not saying anything bad about any station, but it's stressful to watch severe weather coverage with all the excitement. And it stresses me out as a grown adult meteorologist who knows a lot about how the system works. I don't know. I think that's one thing I would like to study more. That's one thing I would really like to know, and work with people like Kim to do some type of study to figure out. Some people it helps. I'm giving a very long-winded answer, but I think some people it helps and some people it hurts, but we don't know. I don't know much more than that. Maybe Kim has the answer.
No, that's I can see it splitting both ways, and it might hinge on the kind of information you're providing. So just giving a torrent of risk information, threat, I think that is going to naturally make you very anxious. But the literature on response says there's two parts to the information people need in order to successfully respond to a threat. It's both having the hazard information and having this response efficacy piece. So knowing what it is they can do about it. And we need to be very careful not to over exaggerate the risk part, the hazard part, and not to undersell the safety part. And I think both of those things are going on in some broadcast markets. We're overdoing the risk part, and we're underselling the things you can do and saying they're not going to be effective enough. Well, what do you think is going to happen when you're sort of biasing both sides of the equation? You're almost tweaking people into a place where they're going to not be able to respond as well as they ought. And it's tough for broadcast markets because I know that you have to communicate to a large audience. And so the people who are under threat are continually changing. So you sort of always have to be talking about the threat as it's evolving. So I don't envy that task, but I think it's very important to be very measured, in what you're saying is likely to occur or could be occurring. Just watching some of the coverage on Saturday, we knew if there were tornadoes, they would still be weak. But the way that, the heightened voices, the alarm, I found it myself gravitated toward the one station where they were speaking in the calmest, most rational tones, most measured language about what was going on, because I just knew this is not worth being so darn scared over. And I was also sitting there feeling pretty anxious, and you just feel so vulnerable. And it just wasn't worth it. And I thought, why? Why are we doing this to ourselves, to people that we're trying to serve? There must be some better way. And just the language difference was huge for me. Being very calm, that was helpful.
Yeah, and I think an education thing, and this could be an ongoing thing. And so many people think of a tornado, and when they envision a tornado, they think of the worst tornado that they've experienced or they've personally witnessed or someone around them. So here, people think of May 20th or May 31st of 2013 when they hear tornado. Well, it was a tornado that hit the Riverwind Casino Saturday night, but it was not even a 1% of the May 20th tornado. All tornadoes are not created equal. And honestly, I was flipping through the channels, and there were some messages that were very measured, very appropriate, and they were really describing that, okay, yeah, this is a tornado, but it's going to be weak. If you just do these simple actions, you'll be okay. They were being very descriptive, very calm, and I just think that helps everybody. Just not all tornadoes are equal. Just because it's a tornado doesn't mean you're all going to die.
Yeah, and you don't have to be just hitting the panic button all the time to incite people to respond. And I think that's something that sometimes meteorologists believe. If we don't do something that causes people to get that, immediacy, that sense of urgency about needing to respond, that they won't. People are processing. They're listening. They're thinking, and it could be that you actually, fear is a very delicate thing. A little bit is motivational, but too much is overwhelming and just trumps response. So that's something really important to keep in mind, that calm, deliberative tone. And I know, James, that's something that folks have said of your coverage, that you do maintain that sense of calm, and what people use as a cue isn't even necessarily your heightened language. It's things like you're rolling up your sleeves, and so they have to look to like more subtle body cues to try to infer when it's a real deal. And
that brings to mind this question. So, and I totally agree. I mean, most tornadoes are EF0s and EF1s. Very few are EF4s and EF5s, yet those attract the attention. Those are the ones that people remember. But let's say you do happen to see a very large wedge tornado via a chopper, sky cam, dash cam, whatever. The radar signature is off the charts. You got debris being lofted, and you have reason to believe this is an EF4, EF5 strong violent tornado. What's the best way to communicate that urgency? I mean, and I'm not the kind of guy that gets my underwear flapping up down my legs and my hands go waving and you're screaming at everybody. But is there do you need to show a little more? I don't know. Kim, what would you do? I mean, what advice would you give to television weather people when it comes to stepping up the urgency of your message?
Yeah, this is something that's seen some active debate in our field. What is the right thing to do might vary by situation. I mean, at that point, when you see something that bad, I think it's worth raising the alarms and saying, this is the higher end threat. This is, of the more extreme tornadoes you may have encountered, this is going to be one of them, or one of those events, broadly speaking, with many of them. And I think it's equally important to keep, as much as you're reinforcing that the risk is really quite bad, to avoid saying things like it is unsurvivable, to avoid saying things that are disempowering. I think the best message you can give is, at this point with what it is, if you're in some county like an hour away, if you live in a mobile home, this is when by now you should be considering, if there's a friend you can go to who's in a well-built home, like try to get somewhere just a little bit better, that's very, but only if you're that far. If you're closer, be in your interior room. There's actually some really interesting work when these questions come up. I always worry most for the people in vulnerable housing, because they're the ones who have to make a decision. Otherwise, most of the best thing people can do is just find their best interior room or shelter. But for people who are in some apartments and in modular manufactured housing, the best thing for them to do in a situation like that is to leave ahead of time, well ahead of time, enough time to get them out of their car and into their building. But there was some work that's been done by one of my colleagues at the University of Maryland. He was studying, as part of the Vortex Southeast project, he was studying the perceptions of safety from people who live in mobile homes. And they tend to believe that it's good enough for them to get into their interior room of their modular home. And they don't necessarily understand that that will not do very much for them for anything greater than an EF1 tornado. So if anything, I feel like in the situation you're describing, James, it would be a really good thing to try to reinforce for the people who are the most vulnerable that, that's not going to cut it. And well ahead of time, they need to have some plan, and it doesn't have to be like a perfect plan, but just getting to a house is going to improve their odds dramatically.
New work.
Drastic
too.
and
Yeah.
dramatic together, dramatically.
I like that word. I like that.
Yes.
By the way, I should mention, whenever we do have an EF4, EF5, Brian takes his pants off, which I would not advise any meteorologist to do that.
Yes, Kim James really needs some new material, because most of the times when I'm in the field, he'll say something like this. Now, you shouldn't be out there driving around. Now let's go to Brian Peters, who's out there driving around. And it's kind of like, I think he's sending the wrong message.
Maybe he's trying to get rid of you,
Let me ask you two in Oklahoma this. I hear this more in Oklahoma City than any other market in the country. I don't know if I hear it anywhere else. I hear this a lot. You won't survive unless you get underground. What started that? And is that ever valid advice to give on the air? I never have, because I don't believe that's valid advice. And there might be a case where it's true, but the odds are so low that you say that and people start to panic. They want to get a shovel and start digging a hole. I mean, where did that come from?
Well, first, I think that has been said on the air here, but it's not as common as some people believe. I've probably only heard it once, maybe, since I've been here, and I've been here since 2002. The first time I'm ever aware of that being said was on May 3rd, 1999, when Gary England made that comment, and it was motivational to people. People still remember that. That's embedded in their memories, and I talk to people all the time. I'll never forget, on May 3rd, Gary told us if we didn't get underground, we wouldn't survive. And there were people getting in manhole covers and things like that on that day. And maybe it helped, it was said, it was close to being said on May 20th, 2013, and definitely on May 31st.
It was said on May 31st. At least I heard it. From one broadcaster.
Yeah. So, and talking to Harold Brooks about this, we've had lots of conversations about this and others. It's just, if you don't give people any hope, then they don't have any hope, and they're either going to do something desperate. Harold has heartbreaking stories from May 3rd where there were kids at home alone, sitting on the couch, latchkey kids waiting for their parents to come home from work, and they're watching TV and they hear, if you can't get below ground, you're going to die. Well, here's 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. What do they do? Do they just sit there and, can you imagine? I mean, and I'm not being critical of Gary, not being critical of anybody that said this. I'm not saying, would I say the same thing if I was on TV? I don't know, but I think we need to think about that. I think I would not want to say that, and I would rather not hear that. But it just seems like we need to be spending as much time as possible leading up to that moment, telling people what they can do, and not, we have to give them options. We have to give them something that they can do. Do the best you can. There's something everybody can do. I don't care if you're in a house with no underground shelter. If there's an EF5 coming, there's something you can do to improve your chances. Lots and lots and lots of people survived EF5 tornadoes in their houses before. So, but I don't think that's one of the things about Oklahoma is people, that's rare even for here, but it has been said a couple of times. Kim, what your experience has been, or what you think about it.
I think that's right. I think it's only said in some of the bigger events and in the the haste of the moment. I think it's interesting when Gary England said that, he probably didn't know how survivable something like that could be. The research hadn't been done yet to explore survivability. That was the first event I can recall there having been a study done on the survivability rate, like an actual estimate made of, here's the population that was in the path and here's the proportion of people who perished. So that was the first tornado a detailed study was done on, and it showed that 99% of the people in the path did survive. So he didn't know that at the time, and I think he was trying to just come up with something to try to inspire response. So when you're sort of the first and before things are known, it's always tough, and I have empathy for that. I think now it's worth turning the tide and trying to focus, instead of focusing on the hopelessness, like you're saying, to focus on where there is the hope and what you can do. And don't aim for perfect. Don't just talk about perfect. Talk about getting people like a little bit better off than they are.
This is one of the problems that I see that for the TV part, and we talked about this just a tiny bit. We just grazed it at the IWT meeting. Is you go up on TV and there is this expectation and this need for continuous coverage and no dead air. And one of the benefits I think that's going to come from when we realize the streaming part is that we don't have to have no dead air. If you go up and you're looking at stuff and nobody says anything for 5 minutes, you know what? That's okay. But in these moments where you have to keep talking because you're on TV and it can't lag and you got to go from the thing to the thing to the thing to the thing to the thing, or in my case where you don't have the things, you just got to keep talking. You got to fill the empty space. And I think that that's really kind of become unfortunate. And I know all of us have been in that place where you've been on the TV for 6 or 7 hours straight or whatever it is, and you just get to a point where you just don't know what you're saying anymore. And that's when some of those things maybe come out.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Rick, I think you had a really important nugget in there, and it made me think back to this event with this young man from Auburn that James and I visited with. That afternoon started with a visit to the National Weather Service in Birmingham. And my message started out with these people in this room, and John DeBlock and Kevin Laws, took him in the audit, into the conference room and sat down with him and, talked just, 30 minutes about severe weather and how things work and let him ask questions. And I think that may have been the freeing message, that all these people have your back. And maybe we aren't spending enough time emphasizing, the weather enterprise that's there, because really the 3,500 some odd men and women of the National Weather Service are dedicated to that purpose. We get to be the last mile in a lot of cases, but there is somebody up even last night in Huntsville, Alabama, when there was an unexpected EF1 tornado, that came out of a system that we never would have expected to produce a tornado.
You're not alone. I mean, you're not sitting in an adobe structure out in the middle of the plains of Kansas in the 1800s. I mean, there literally is technology and radars and satellites and people and TV meteorologists and chasers and helicopters. And I mean, there literally is an army of people that are doing everything they can to identify these things and tell people that they are coming. So you're truly never alone when it comes to that. And that's always the message that I try to give when they come visit. And it's, I don't know, it seems to help. I mean, I don't know if people just don't realize that. I mean, we have tour groups that come through all the time. And I was giving tours to people during the Weather Festival on Saturday, and it seems like even people that live in Oklahoma, adults seem to be, they're like, wow, I had no idea all this was here. I didn't know there was this many people watching out for us, and it's fascinating. But I think that's an important message that maybe people don't hear enough.
One of the things that I feel like I've gotten a sense of a little bit of comfort from people, or a little better feeling from them is, and it doesn't sound like much, but they seem to respond to it, is oftentimes I've said to them, the people that are paying attention like you are, they say, oh, we watch you and we're paying attention and we're watching, the TV's on and everything's quiet and we're paying attention. And I try and tell them, well, the people that are paying attention like you are the ones who are clearly tuned in, and they are improving their own odds by paying attention and not panicking and being calm and thinking ahead, but just by staying tuned in. And they oftentimes seem to take some comfort from that.
And we also try to emphasize to people that little tiny steps that you can take before those sirens sound or before that tornado watch or warning is issued can make all the difference. Every little preparation you make on a sunny day, or if you were watching and paying attention and you were at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Saturday afternoon, you knew there was a risk of severe weather, so you went ahead and got your carriers for the cats in a spot where you knew where they were and you knew what you were going to do. Just that little tiny bit of preparation takes the edge off some of the stress. I don't think a lot of people trying to do more of. Instead of just putting tornado safety rules at the bottom of a tornado warning, I think we need to be telling people the safety guidelines in the days and hours before, and let people know, hey, there's simple things that you can do right now that aren't going to cost you a dime that will help you later today. You may not need it, but it'll make you feel better and it'll be less stressful if you do it. I don't think we do enough of that either.
I think that's really good, because you just reminded me of something, because we put in a shelter not long ago, and my wife now has it on her calendar that every 2 weeks she takes the little shop vac in there and she cleans out the spiders, because she doesn't want to be down there with the spiders. But hearing you say that, the pride that she takes in doing that and talking about it, it is a tiny little step of preparation that makes her feel better. That's really interesting, Rick.
And it's empowerment. I mean, you're empowering yourself. You're like, okay, the storms are going to come no matter what I do, but I can do something to be ready for them. I can do something to reduce their impact.
Yeah, that's really good.
Isn't it so interesting that we've spent so much time focusing as a field on trying to motivate response by building people up, building up their concern and their fear, and so little time building up their comfort and their sense of safety? And what you're talking about is like a totally different paradigm than what we traditionally focus on, because we've had this sort of belief that people need to have their head hit about to actually care about this stuff, but they really, really do. You know, and I think it's almost to the point where as a culture, we're just so surrounded by and inundated by risk that it's almost that our job is sort of changing a little bit, that we can be comforters and not just threat alerters.
And one thing a concern I always have, and I had this at NWA, I did the anxiety talk for the broadcasters and for the general session. I don't want people to think that we're saying, well, let's sugarcoat everything. We don't want to scare anybody, so let's don't tell them if it's going to be bad. I'm not saying that at all. Be factual. Tell people what we're expecting and when we expect it to happen. But you know, there's ways you can do that without putting a lot of extra flavoring on it to make it unnecessarily scary.
Yeah.
So Rick, one last thing. I had a whole section to talk to you about your discussion about red flag warnings and changing that paradigm, but it sounds like you're going to have to come back and be the guest weather brain again sometime soon. And we'll get to all that, because this talk tonight has just been fascinating to me. But you mentioned a couple of other things in your talk in California, and that they resonated with me. One was communicating that we have a healthy respect or fear of severe weather. How effective is that? And maybe Kim can chime in on it too. And relaying what we do, you know, because we've talked about things that are empowering. Is it empowering to talk about our actions that we might be taking with our families before we come to work on a day like that?
I think absolutely. And to your first point, I think Kim already addressed it. It's like, you know, you need to be afraid of tornadoes. We want people to be scared of tornadoes, but there is a healthy level of fear and a respectful fear of severe weather. And that's really what we should be aiming for. Is you don't need to be terrified of this like it's a scary clown that's coming out of the sewer or something to come get you. This is something that we're going to know is coming almost all the time. We're going to give you information, and we want you to have a healthy respect for it, but there's no need to panic. I mean, this is not a monster that's just going to appear out of the darkness to get us. I mean, this is something that nowadays we know when that monster's coming, so we can do better. And to the other point, and I'll want to hear from Kim, but I've had great success. And when I'm briefing even emergency managers or people, when I'm doing webinars and things on severe weather, it's become quite a thing with some of them. They want to know what I'm doing. So I've had great success by just saying, well, they want to know, well, a school will call and say, well, should we cancel our graduation ceremonies tonight because of the severe weather threat? I'll say, well, I can't tell you whether to cancel or not, but I can tell you, and this was this was May 24, 2011. I said, well, I can tell you that my son's supposed to be having 5th grade graduation tonight, and he will not be going. He'll be staying at home, and there's a curfew at my house at 4 p.m., and nobody's allowed to be on the roads after that. When people hear what I don't know. I think when people see a meteorologist acting or hear what a meteorologist is doing, they personalize it a little bit more. And I was interested what Kim thinks about that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. That was actually a key finding in one of the there were a suite of projects that were funded in the wake of Superstorm Sandy out of the Sea Grant program, the National Sea Grant program. 3 of their coastal offices in New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, they all had 3 or 4 grants per state. And one of those grants found that one of the biggest drivers to take protective action to evacuate ahead of Superstorm Sandy for some coastal communities was that they saw what their emergency managers were doing. They either saw it on the news or saw it on social media. And when they saw those reports, they thought, oh, well, they're going. I mean, if they're taking their families, I'm going to take my family. And it's something that disaster sociologists love to say. Warnings are often thought of as a technical process of just getting messages through the technology, but it's really a social process. What it is human to human signaling that there's a threat and that you have a relationship that exists ahead of time. And, it's really very much about us as conveyors of message, as humans. And when we can bring our humanity and some of those social ties to bear on the messaging, it's really, really powerful. So much more powerful than anything you could ever show on radar.
Yeah.
It's been a great show. We've had some great information here, but we have to stop for a moment and hit a little break here with Professor Peters and Tony Rice in the Astronomy Report. We'll come back with the Weather Roundup. We'll do Picks of the Week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
Last week, we introduced you to the mission of the hurricane hunters of the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. The FIX mission is where the aerial reconnaissance weather officer will direct the crew to the true center of the storm. In order to get a good overall look at the storm, the unit flies the storm using an alpha pattern, which consists of intercardinal headings with legs of 105 nautical miles in length. This alpha pattern is repeated 2 times during one mission. During flight, weather data is continuously collected and sent directly to the National Hurricane Center via satellite communications. Since the WC-130J is not equipped for aerial refueling, no fuel is reached or the National Hurricane Center has received all the information it needs. The flights enter major hurricanes category 3 or above at 10,000 feet. While penetrating the eye wall, a weather instrument called a dropson is released to determine the maximum winds at the surface, and then another son is released in the eye to detect the lowest pressure at the surface. A third dropson is released as the aircraft exits the eye, typically on the opposite side from the initial penetration. After exiting the eye, the aerial reconnaissance weather officer creates a vortex message that includes the exact latitude and longitude of the center, as well as maximum winds, maximum temperature, and minimum pressure. Dropsons released from the aircraft collect the same vertical data that radiosondes carried aloft by weather balloons do over land. But instead of going up, these instruments go down or drop, gathering weather data including wind direction and speed, pressure, temperature, and humidity from the plane's altitude to the water's surface, creating a vertical profile of the atmosphere. In our next installment on Hurricane Hunters, we'll take a look at the why of what they do and look into other missions besides hurricanes. If you have a question about the weather, drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
This past weekend marked the peak of the Orionid meteor shower. Most of the usual sources for astronomy news, as well as the mainstream ones, had features on the event. Many were great, preparing observers for what to expect and when to look and how to get the best show, but others were so vague and even overhyped that they could have easily led their readers to disappointment. So, a bit of advice. When sharing information about meteor showers, be careful not to set expectations too high, especially on the numbers of meteors to expect. Pay attention to the forecasted ZHR and the radiant point for that particular meteor shower. First, that ZHR. This stands for zenithal hourly rate. That's the number of meteors that a single observer might see in an hour of peak activity, but when the radiant point is in the sky directly overhead at zenith. ZHR also implies some ideal conditions. Clouds and light pollution that we all have to deal with impact how many meteors you'll actually see. but so does the position of that radiant. And when it's low on the horizon, the light from that meteor has a lot more air to pass through than when it's directly overhead. Think about it this way. When you go outside and gaze at the stars, you're standing under a pair of domes. The figurative one, of course, the dome of the background stars, but there's a literal one there as well. That's the atmosphere. The top of that dome is only 100 kilometers away. All the stars and planets and satellites that pass through that point are at their brightest. At the edges, though, at the horizon, all that atmosphere dims that same light. Astronomers know this as atmospheric extinction, and it's greater than you might think. At the horizon, there's somewhere between 35 and 40 times as much air mass between you and that meteor. This means that the dimming effect that the atmosphere has from zenith to horizon is roughly logarithmic. Good source for meteor activity forecasts is the American Meteor Society, that other AMS, and you can reach them at amsmeteors.org. Their forecasts generally take into account atmospheric extinction, but are still expressed assuming ideal conditions, away from light pollution. So, you know your audience, adjust appropriately. And when in doubt, tack on a under ideal conditions to any forecast for the number of meteors. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
So Brian, this is always the part of the show where we get to where James says, all right, Bill, you have to take it. And Brian goes, crud, I'm going to miss my bedtime again.
Absolutely.
It always happens. So, I always get to this part of the show and I'm supposed to say, yeah, thanks, Tony Rice, for that, report. And I never can remember what he calls it, So tonight I'm going to call it Planets and Possums. How about that, Brian? Will Planets and Possums work? So, Kim, there was a discussion last week. We've had great discussion. We missed you. I know you were on the service assessment, blah, blah, blah. Some people were questioning, how are we supposed to actually say your last name correctly?
Oh, everyone quiet. Everyone quiet now. Listen carefully.
Right, we're all taking notes.
I'm wondering, do you remember what the guesses were?
Clock owl, cloaco, everything in between.
Awesome. Yeah, this is a complex topic. It's often misspelled and often mispronounced, and for 7 letters, they sure do create havoc. So it actually is said cloaco. It's
I got it right, Brian Peters.
Good job. Very nice. Yeah, I think
I wasn't very confident that I had it right, but
I'm embarrassed. I never even guessed that one.
Yeah.
I remember I was sitting by Gina Esco at the NWA, and I whispered in her ear. I said, whose name gets mispronounced more, yours or Kim's? And I think it's pretty close from what I've heard.
So Kim, give us some inside information. How are we supposed to say Gina's name? I mean, she's on council at NWA, and I can't even pronounce it.
Right? Yeah. So you often hear Iasco. I think that it is. I thought that it actually is. Now I'm doubting myself. Yeah. Dang it! I lived with her. We were roommates. No, I think it's Iasco. But she's gonna kill me. But I thought that's what it was. It might be Esco. I don't know right now. And now I'm doubting it.
I remember a high instability.
Regretting bringing it up at all.
Yeah, exactly. I remember a high instability show with Gene Roden that I really loved, and I think that's how I was introduced to you and Gina. Who was the third social scientist on the show that night?
Oh, Heather Lazarus.
Okay, good. All right, that now I remember. That's
and Kim, say yours again.
So my name, and I have some mnemonic devices, some ways you can remember this. It's Cloco. So it's like or Loco with a K, which is the favorite of many. A lot of people are like, hey, Loco with a K. When I tell them that, they just forget my last name entirely. They're like, hey, Loco. I'm like, well, as long as it's followed by Cloco. Loco Cloco. So, yes, that's how it's said. Now you're not going to forget it.
No, that's exactly right. Well, it's time of the show for the weather roundup going around the country. I'm fearful for Southern California when I look at all these critical fire dangers and excessive heat warnings and temperatures 97 to 105 in the Los Angeles area. That's just not a good thing. Any comments from my meteorology panel here?
No,
They've had their share of
a-
problems, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I really am enjoying it. I don't know how long. I don't think I really paid attention until Greg talked about it at the NWA in California about the new excessive rainfall outlooks and the slights and mediums and highs and all that. I'm really enjoying looking at that product regularly. Any comments on that? Because we've got some of those in the East tonight.
I always look at it. I think it's good, kind of good guidance.
I do too, and sort of a stealing thunder, Rick. You're talking about this sort of outlook, watch, warning paradigm, sort of bleeding over to the fire weather program. Is that something that's really underfoot, or is that something being talked about? What's the deal there?
Well, it's certainly being talked about. I don't know how high up or how serious it is yet, but we don't have time to get into it in detail. And really, there's people. It really would be good to get some people on to talk about some of this in more detail. But the fire weather information program is really probably needs some modernization. It was designed for meteorologists to talk to fire behavior specialists, and it was never intended for meteorologists to give information to the public. So the red flag warning, as it is used today, is really not, I mean, we're still using it like we're supposed to, but it's being used for purposes it was never intended for. So I think that's one big step that we're looking at modernizing. And but yeah, the whole outlook, watch, warning cascade of information in the days, hours, and minutes. In my opinion, it's good to be looking at that, is because this is not going away. I mean, obviously, we're going to be talking about wildfires all the time, and how do we let people know? What's the most effective way to let people know those are coming up?
I spend most of my time with sixth graders now, it appears, after all of this teaching that I've gotten to do this fall. And I was really surprised at how much the wildfires in Southern California, and especially the wildfires in Eastern Tennessee last October, affected them deeply. Because when, I showed the Yarnell Hill fire in 2013 in Arizona as an example of why meteorology plays such an important role in keeping our firefighters who are fighting these big wildfires safe, and talking about, important weather forecasts to them. And that always resonated with them unanimously. When we started talking about wildfires, it really got their attention, and I think they're really concerned about it. And so I thought that
absolutely.
I thought that was just fascinating. My time with sixth graders is eye-opening for sure. So the rest of the country's been busy in North Carolina and Virginia, tornado watches, all sorts of crazy things tonight. Looks like we've got severe weather risk tomorrow, even into New York City, as the system exits, and quite a bit of energy in that trough. So and
we're here. I mean, we don't want anybody to have severe weather, but yeah, we were happy to see it push off to the east. We've gotten had a nice cold front come through Saturday night and had another one come through earlier today. So it just keeps reinforcing finally some fall-like temperatures, and enjoying that.
So Brian, have you looked up how to pronounce the P storm in the Atlantic this year?
No, I have not.
Does anyone know how to pronounce the P storm if it forms in the next 5 days?
How is it spelled?
Felipe, I think, but I would bet Felipe, since we're caught up on names tonight. That's what our main subject of the show has become, naming brains. I would say Felipe. What would say you, Rick Smith?
Well, as soon as I can get to the Atlantic Basin storm name pronunciation.
There's a pronunciation thing. It's linked on the NHC website under the storm names section.
I was trying to look really smart and just.
Philippe. It's Philippe.
Philippe. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good. So 50% chance of formation, and maybe Cuba and the Bahamas. What do y'all think?
I'm good with that.
Let's get picks of the weekend while we got Kevin online. Kevin, you got a pick of the week for us?
It's been so long since I have been on. We're getting a new weather graphics system here, and that's why I was off the last 2 weeks, because we were in training. And I can't remember what I've sent and what I've not sent. Brian might be able to tell, but we've seen this before. It's just under a new name. But before, you remember that thing that was the wind particles? That was a worldwide wind particles kind of animating thing, but the URL was earthschoolnull.net or some nonsense like that. But now, if you just go to windy.com, you get a nice little particle map there.
Outstanding. What
Easy to just get lost in that map too, Kevin.
Yeah. I think actually it's spelled windy, but it's pronounced cloco.
I want to know how to pronounce the third name in the house you were sharing, Gina, Kim. That one's going to drive me crazy right there.
Oh, it's a fabulous Polish name. So my name is also Polish, and my friend Angelin, that last name belongs to her. Now she's a Hobson. But how would you guess it's said? I'll just spell it out for any audience that's listening still. It's Kolodzik. What do you think that is?
I lost you after the third letter.
Unpronounceable. Kolodzik.
I think it's Gesundheit.
Yeah, God bless you.
I'm just glad she got married.
Yep, it's too bad she got married. I'm so sad she lost that name. Rick, do you remember how it said?
No, I just always said Angelin. So.
Yeah. So that name is actually said Koloji.
There you go.
Koloji.
Yeah.
Now that you said that, I do remember that. Yeah.
Sounds like something you pick up at a Polish food festival and enjoy a Koloji. I'll take a Koloji with sausage, please. So.
Yep. All
right. Well, we've got Kevin's pick of the week just in time. Brian Peters, what's your pick of the week?
The NWS at Elko posted a picture of a mothership cloud, and I just those are so fascinating. So I'll have a link to their Twitter feed and the picture.
Outstanding. And I have a pick of the week, but I forget what it is. Brian Peters, can you tell me what my pick of the week was?
I sure can. Your pick of the week.
Oh, it's the HRRR time lagged ensembles.
It. Yeah, that's it.
That's a great one. That's gonna be really cool to follow. I got a year's worth of picks at NWA this year, so I'm excited about that. So that's I will not get the foghorn until 2018 at least. So Rick Smith, pick of the week.
My pick of the week is related to our discussion about storm anxiety, and this is a webpage that we're working on with the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps, their stress response team, who's been doing some training for us with our staff and who we've been working with. And they've got a page on their website now devoted to severe storms, reducing anxiety, and enhancing resilience. And this is the spot where we're going to be putting a lot of that FAQ type information, addressing specific fears that people have and giving them some actionable, practical, empowering advice for what they can do to, take back some of that power from the storms.
Well, Rick, the things you do are amazing, and the things you do for the Weather Enterprise are just unbelievable. So it's been really fun having you as the official guest weather brain tonight. We said it was a homegrown show, but really it was just like having any of our best weather brains with us tonight. So thank you for doing it on short notice.
Yeah, I think it was the got to throw Kim in there too. Kim was. Exactly. I'm so glad. I'm so glad Kim is on the show now, and she just makes us all seem so much smarter. So
whatever. I'm honored to be here with you all. You're all awesome.
The collective IQ did go up a bunch of points, that's for sure. A lot. I'm really excited that Steve Weiss will be joining us on December the 11th, and we've had an invite into Patrick Marsh to come be guest panelist with us tonight. He couldn't join us, but we'll have him on again very, very soon. And if I could find my schedule, I'd tell you all the rest of the weather brains that are coming up. But Kim, what have you got for us pick of the week?
Yeah, mine's a little bit out of the box. It's a New York Times article that was just published a couple days ago called "When the Revolution Came for Amy Cuddy." And it's a story of a social psychologist. You may have heard of her work. It's the work on posturing, this sort of belief that if you posture in like a power pose, you'll actually feel more powerful, and there'll be downstream effects on confidence. And she had like the most viewed TED Talk at some point. So the story is really about her downfall, and it's really interesting story because it's about the field of social psychology and how when it was introduced to social media, there were people who arose to sort of challenge research. And it reminded me actually a good deal of our field, and especially our interdisciplinary space. I think once we all got engaged in social media, there was a bit of a renaissance early on where we all were able to exchange information. But in recent years, there's been a lot of sort of snide, just junk that's kind of emerged. And as I read it, I was like, gosh, I didn't even realize that other fields were going through the same kinds of things that I feel like we're going through, where everyone's going to have an opinion, and you already know what certain people's opinions are going to be before an event even has a chance to take place. And it's almost this point of stagnancy, but there's also there's a lot of danger, I think, in treating each other in ways on social media that we wouldn't face to face. So it's sort of a lengthy treatment, but I think it's a really nice story, and was thought-provoking for me, and especially for folks who are in our weather community. I highly recommend giving it a read.
Outstanding. We're so glad you could join us tonight, and I'm glad you're here with us. So any other things before we adjourn this august group tonight? Nothing around the WeatherBrains digital table. Brian, anything from you?
Nope.
Well, good. Well, we'll just wrap this thing up. Next week, we'll have Josh Eachus. We'll be talking social media. He did an interesting talk at NWA about the effectiveness of social media in a severe weather situation. And we'll have one of my favorite people, Pam Heinzelman, talking about One on Forecast on November 6th. I'm excited about that. And some other great guests are coming up in future weeks on WeatherBrains. It's been a fun talk tonight. Thank you, everybody, for staying up late. Thanks for everybody sticking with us and listening all the way to the end of the show. And until next week, when our guest will be Josh Eachus, and it's hard for me to say that very quickly or very smoothly. I'm Bill Murray for the whole group here at WeatherBrains. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for being here, Kim.
Oh, yeah. It's great to be back, guys.
Yeah, it was great to have you. And Rick, thank you so much.
Oh, it was a great discussion. Thanks, Kim.
And I never got to ask you how you got interested in weather, but I guess you sort of indirectly answered it.
It was just ingrained in me from birth somehow. I don't know how.
Infused in the DNA, I would have to agree.
Yeah.
All right, guys, have a good week.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
And you're still here. Hey, guys, doing TV next door. Thank you all for watching. See you next week. Have a great week. God bless. Bye-bye.